The fine arrived in my mailbox on a Thursday morning in January, nestled between a utility bill and a grocery store flyer, and I knew before I even opened it that Patricia Donovan had struck again. I stood there on my driveway in Bozeman, Montana, the cold biting through my jacket as I tore open the official-looking envelope from the Meadowbrook Heights Homeowners Association. $500. $500 for excessive noise disturbance during prohibited hours related to my snow removal activities. I read the letter 3 times, each time feeling my blood pressure rise despite the frigid temperature. The thing was, I knew exactly what this was about. 3 nights ago, at 11:30 at night, I had fired up my snowplow attachment on my truck to clear not just my own driveway, but the entire street. We had gotten 14 inches of snow, and the city plows would not reach our development until the next afternoon at the earliest. People needed to get to work. I needed to get to work. I ran Anderson Landscaping and Snow Removal, and I had a dozen commercial contracts that required me to be on site by 6 in the morning. So yeah, I made some noise. But I also cleared every single driveway and street in our subdivision for free, something I had been doing for the past 3 winters since I moved to Meadowbrook Heights. I never asked for payment. I never expected thanks. I just did it because it was the right thing to do and because I had the equipment sitting there anyway. My name is Aaron Vance, and I have owned my house in this development for 4 years now. For the first year, everything was fine. The HOA was relatively hands-off, managed by a property management company that seemed to understand that people actually lived in these houses and were not just decorative elements in some suburban tableau. Then Patricia Donovan moved in next door to the HOA president, got herself elected to the board, and within 6 months had maneuvered herself into the position of HOA president when the previous one resigned in frustration. Patricia was 52 years old, never worked a day in her life according to the neighborhood gossip, lived off her divorce settlement, and had made it her personal mission to enforce every single rule in our CC and advocacy with the enthusiasm of a medieval inquisitor. She had dirty blonde hair always styled in that aggressive bob that somehow communicated, "I want to speak to your manager," before she even opened her mouth. She wore velour tracksuits in pastel colors and drove a white BMW SUV with a custom license plate that read, "Blessed One." I walked back into my house, the warmth hitting me as I closed the door. My golden retriever, Max, padded over, and I absently scratched behind his ears while I read the fine letter again. According to the document, the HOA CC and advocacy prohibited loud machinery, construction noise, or other disturbances between the hours of 10 p.m. and 7 a.m. My snow clearing had violated this by an hour and a half. Never mind that I had cleared the streets for free. Never mind that without me, half the neighborhood would have been snowed in. Never mind that several people had called and texted me to say thank you. Patricia Donovan had decided I was in violation, and now I owed $500. I pulled out my phone and called my lawyer, Jake Morrison. Jake and I went way back to high school, and he had helped me set up my business. He also happened to live in the same neighborhood, though on the other side of the development. "Aaron, what's up?" Jake answered on the second ring. "I need you to look at something. Patricia and her HOA board just fined me $500 for snow clearing." There was a pause. "For snow clearing, the thing you do for free for everyone, the very same, says I violated the noise ordinance in the CC and advocacy. Send me a picture of the letter. I will look at it and call you back in an hour." I did as he asked and then headed into my home office. I had paperwork to catch up on, invoices to send, and a schedule to plan for the rest of the week. February was always busy for snow removal, and I had 3 more potential storms on the forecast. Montana winters did not mess around. Jake called back in 45 minutes. Okay, so technically they have a leg to stand on. The CC and Arcticus do prohibit that kind of noise during those hours. However, there is also a section about community welfare and emergency situations. A major snowstorm could arguably fall under that. But here is the thing, Aaron. Fighting this will cost you more in legal fees than just paying the fine. I am not paying it, I said immediately. It is the principle of the thing. I do this for free, Jake. I spend my own gas, my own time, wear and tear on my equipment. And this is how they thank me. I get it, man. I really do. But you need to think strategically here. I am thinking strategically. If they want to fine me for clearing snow, then I just will not clear snow anymore. Let's see how they like that. Jake was quiet for a moment. You are serious. Completely serious. I clear the private streets in our development, not the city. The city only does the main roads. If I do not clear our streets, nobody does. That is going to make you unpopular. With Patricia and her cronies, sure. But everyone else, they will understand once they know why, and I am going to make sure everyone knows exactly why. After I hung up with Jake, I sat down and composed an email to every resident in Meadowbrook Heights. I had collected email addresses over the years for various neighborhood communications. The HOA had an official email list, but I had my own as well. The email was simple and straightforward. I explained that I had been fined by the HOA for clearing snow during prohibited hours. I explained that I had been doing this as a free service for the past 3 winters. I explained that I would no longer be providing this service, as I could not afford to rack up fines every time it snowed. I apologized for any inconvenience and suggested that residents contact the HOA board if they had concerns about snow removal on the private streets. I hit send, and then forwarded a copy to Patricia Donovan directly, along with the entire HOA board. The response was immediate and overwhelming. Within an hour, my phone was blowing up with calls and texts. Most were supportive. Some were angry, but not at me. They were angry at Patricia and the board. A few people offered to pay the fine for me, which I declined. This was about principle, not money. Patricia herself called me at 3 in the afternoon. I let it go to voicemail. She called again at 3:15. Voicemail again. At 3:30, she showed up at my front door. I opened it to find her standing there in a pink velour tracksuit, her face pinched with anger. Aaron, we need to talk. I am not paying the fine, Patricia. This is not about the fine. Well, it is, but it is about more than that. You cannot just stop clearing the snow. People are upset. Then maybe the HOA should not have fined me for clearing the snow in the first place. You violated the noise ordinance. Rules are rules. And those rules make it so nobody can clear the snow when it actually needs to be cleared. Did you think about that when you decided to fine me? She drew herself up to her full height, which was maybe 5'4". The board discussed it and we voted. The decision stands. Then so does mine. No more free snow clearing. If people want their streets cleared, they can hire someone, or they can convince the HOA to hire someone, but I am done. You are being childish. I am being rational. I am not going to pay hundreds of dollars in fines for the privilege of doing free work. That makes no sense. The HOA could have your truck towed if you leave it on the street during snow clearing. My truck is never on the street during snow clearing. I clear and move. And my property is clear at all times. Try again. Her face was getting red now. You are turning the neighborhood against the board. No, Patricia. You did that when you fined me for helping people. I am just making sure everyone knows why I am not helping anymore. She turned on her heel and stalked back to her BMW. I watched her peel out of my driveway, leaving tire marks on the snow-packed surface. Max whined beside me. "I know, buddy. She is something else." That night, the first angry emails started arriving to the HOA board. I knew because several people forwarded them to me. Residents were demanding that the fine be rescinded. They were pointing out that my service had been valuable and free. They were asking why the board was punishing someone for helping the community. Patricia sent out a response the next morning. It was classic HOA speak, full of phrases like maintaining standards and ensuring compliance and treating all residents equally. She pointed out that the rules existed for a reason and that the board had a duty to enforce them. She made no mention of the fact that I had been clearing snow for free or that the streets would now remain unplowed. The weekend came and went without incident. The weather was clear and cold, and there was no new snow. I worked my regular commercial contracts and spent Saturday afternoon watching college basketball with Max curled up at my feet. The next storm was forecast for Tuesday night into Wednesday morning. The weather service was predicting 8 to 12 inches. I made sure all my commercial equipment was ready and went to bed early Tuesday night. I woke up at 4 a.m. Wednesday to the sound of wind howling outside. I looked out my window and could see the snow coming down heavy and thick. I got dressed, fed Max, and headed out to my truck. My driveway needed clearing before I could leave for work. I fired up the plow and cleared my own driveway and the apron out to the street. The street itself was buried under about 10 inches already, with drifts up to 2 feet in some places. Normally, I would have started clearing the neighborhood streets. Instead, I backed carefully out onto the unplowed street, my truck fishtailing slightly, and headed for the main road. The main road had been plowed by the city. I made my way to my first commercial client, a shopping center, and spent the next 3 hours clearing their lot. Then on to an office building, then a restaurant, then a medical clinic. My commercial contracts kept me busy until noon. When I finally headed home, I drove back into Meadowbrook Heights and nearly laughed at what I saw. The private streets were completely buried. A few people with SUVs or trucks had attempted to drive out and left deep ruts in the snow. Most driveways were uncleared. Cars were stuck. People were out with shovels trying to dig themselves out. I drove carefully down the main street of the development, my plow blade up, not touching anything. Several people waved at me frantically. A few tried to flag me down. I kept driving. When I reached my house, I pulled into my already clear driveway and parked. My neighbor from across the street, Bill Henderson, trudged over through the snow. He was in his 60s, retired, and had always been friendly. "Aaron, please. My wife has a doctor's appointment this afternoon. We cannot get out." "I am sorry, Bill, I really am. But if I plow, Patricia will find me again. I cannot afford to keep paying fines for helping people." "This is ridiculous. What are we supposed to do? Call the HOA, tell them to hire a plowing service. Or tell them to rescind my fine and apologize. Then I will be happy to help." Bill shook his head but did not argue further. He knew I was right. He trudged back to his house, and I saw him on his phone a few minutes later. By that evening, my phone was ringing nonstop. Most calls were from neighbors begging for help. Some were offering money. I politely declined everyone and suggested they contact the HOA board. Patricia called me at 7 p.m. I answered this time. "What, Patricia? You need to clear the streets. This is a safety issue." "Then pay someone to do it, or rescind my fine." "The board is not going to rescind the fine. You violated the rules." "Then the streets do not get cleared by me. Simple as that. You are putting people at risk." "No, you are putting people at risk." You are the one who decided that enforcing a noise ordinance was more important than having clear streets. You made this choice, Patricia. Own it." She hung up on me. The next day, Thursday, was chaos. The neighborhood email list and Facebook group were on fire. Residents were furious. Some were angry at me for not clearing the snow. Most were angry at Patricia and the HOA board for creating this situation. Several people posted screenshots of my original email explaining why I had stopped, and opinion rapidly turned against the board. By Thursday afternoon, an emergency HOA board meeting had been called for Saturday morning. It was announced via email, and residents were invited to attend and voice their concerns. Friday brought another small storm, just 3 inches, but it was enough to make the already bad situation worse. The main roads were clear, but Meadowbrook Heights looked like a disaster zone. Cars were abandoned on streets. Driveways were piled high. People who had managed to dig out earlier in the week were snowed in again. I cleared my own driveway and went to work. My phone rang constantly. I stopped answering. I knew what people wanted, and I could not help them without exposing myself to more fines. Saturday morning arrived clear and cold. The HOA meeting was scheduled for 10 a.m. at the community clubhouse. I debated whether to attend and decided I should. This affected me directly, and I wanted to hear what people had to say. I arrived at 9:50 and found the small clubhouse parking lot already full. Cars lined the street. I had to park 2 blocks away and walk. Inside, every chair was taken and people stood along the walls. I estimated at least 80 people were there, which was remarkable for a development of only 120 homes. Patricia sat at a table at the front with the other 4 board members. Richard Sorensen, Vice President, Helen Martinez, Secretary, Gary Patterson, Treasurer, and Susan Welsh, Member-at-Large. They all looked uncomfortable except Patricia, who had her game face on. The meeting started with Patricia trying to go through normal business, approving the minutes from the last meeting, discussing the budget. People were having none of it. "We are not here for that," someone shouted from the back. "We are here about the snow." Patricia pursed her lips. "We will have an open comment period after regular business." "No." Bill Henderson stood up. "We are talking about this now. You fined Aaron Vance for clearing our streets for free, and now nobody is clearing them. This is unacceptable." A chorus of agreement rippled through the room. Patricia banged a gavel I did not even know she had. "Order. We will maintain order." "Maintain this," someone else called out. "Rescind the fine or we will recall the board." That got everyone's attention. Patricia actually looked shaken. "You cannot recall the board over a single fine." Jake Morrison stood up. I had not even seen him come in. "Actually, Patricia, we can. The CC and Articus allow for a special election to recall board members if 20% of homeowners sign a petition. I have been doing some math, and 20% of 120 homes is 24 signatures. I am pretty confident we can get that today." The room erupted in applause. Patricia banged her gavel again. "That is completely unnecessary. The board acted within its authority." "The board acted stupidly," Bill said. "Aaron was helping everyone for free. You punished him for it. Now we are all suffering. Just admit you were wrong and rescind the fine." Patricia looked at the other board members. Richard and Gary looked like they wanted to be anywhere else. Helen was staring at her hands. Susan looked angry, but I could not tell if she was angry at the crowd or at Patricia. "The board will discuss this in executive session and announce our decision," Patricia finally said. "No executive session," Jake called out. "This is not a personnel matter or a legal matter. This affects the whole community. Discuss it here now and vote here now." More applause. Patricia looked trapped. She leaned over and had a whispered conversation with the other board members. Finally, she straightened up. Fine. The board will now discuss the fine issued to Aaron Vance. Richard Sorensen cleared his throat. He was a thin man in his 50s who worked as an accountant. I voted against issuing the fine in the first place. I think it was a mistake. Aaron was helping the community and the noise disturbance was minimal and necessary. I move that we rescind the fine. I second, Gary Patterson said immediately. Patricia looked like she had bitten into a lemon. Discussion. I think we need to maintain standards, Susan Welsh said. She was Patricia's closest ally on the board, a pinch-faced woman in her late 40s. If we let one person violate the rules, everyone will want to violate the rules. This is not a violation, it is a service, Helen Martinez spoke up. She was a quiet woman, a teacher at the local elementary school. My husband and I could not get to work for 2 days this week because our street was not passable. We almost had to use sick days. Aaron never caused problems before. This fine was vindictive and everyone knows it. Patricia's face went red. Vindictive, how dare you? Call for a vote, Jake said from the audience. You have a motion and a second, vote. Patricia glared at him but had no choice. All in favor of rescinding the fine. Richard, Gary, and Helen raised their hands. Opposed, Patricia and Susan raised their hands. The motion passes 3-2. The fine is rescinded. Patricia could barely get the words out. The room erupted in cheers and applause. I felt a weight lift off my shoulders, but I was not done yet. I raised my hand and Patricia reluctantly acknowledged me. Aaron. I stood up. Thank you. I appreciate the board rescinding the fine, however, I need something more. I need an apology from this board, specifically from Patricia, for the way this was handled. And I need a written acknowledgement that snow clearing during and immediately after major storms is considered an emergency community service and is exempt from the noise ordinance. Patricia looked like I had asked her to chew glass. That is not necessary. It is absolutely necessary, I said. Otherwise, what is to stop you from fining me again the next time it snows? I need protection in writing. Jake stood up again. Aaron is right. The CC and Articus allow for amendments to clarify rules. I move that we add language exempting emergency snow removal from the noise ordinance. You are not on the board. You cannot make a motion, Patricia snapped. But a homeowner can bring a proposal to the board for consideration, Jake countered. Which I am doing now. As legal counsel, I am happy to draft the language. Several people called out their support. Patricia knew she was beaten. Fine, draft the language and send it to the board. We will vote on it at the next meeting. No, I said. You will vote on it today as soon as Jake drafts it. We are not waiting another month for you to try to wiggle out of this. The crowd voiced their agreement loudly. Patricia looked at the other board members, but they all looked away. She was on her own. Fine, she bit out. We will take a 15-minute recess while the language is drafted. Jake and I stepped outside with a couple of other people. Jake pulled out his laptop from his car and started typing. It took him 20 minutes, but he crafted a simple amendment that added an exception to the noise ordinance for emergency snow removal, defined as snow clearing activities during or within 12 hours after a snowfall of 6 inches or more, or as necessary to maintain safe access to residences. We went back inside and Jake read the amendment aloud. All in favor. Richard, Gary, and Helen immediately raised their hands. Susan looked at Patricia, who sat stone-faced and silent. Finally, Susan raised her hand. Patricia was the only no vote. The amendment passes 4-1, Richard said, taking over the meeting. Patricia looked ready to explode. Now about that apology, I said. Patricia stood up. I apologize that this situation escalated. She started to sit down. Not good enough, Bill Henderson called out. "A real apology." Patricia remained standing, her jaw clenched. "I apologize to Aaron Vance for issuing a fine that has been determined to be inappropriate. The board appreciates his service to the community. It was barely adequate, but I decided to take the win. Thank you. I will resume snow clearing as needed now that I have protection from retaliation." More applause. The meeting wrapped up shortly after that and people filed out. Several neighbors came up to thank me and shake my hand. Jake clapped me on the shoulder. "Well played, man. I could not have done it without you." That is what lawyers are for, though I am usually not drafting HOA amendments on the spot. Patricia left without speaking to anyone, Susan scurrying after her. The other board members stayed to chat with residents, and I got the sense that the board dynamics had shifted significantly. I went home feeling vindicated but exhausted. The whole ordeal had been ridiculous and unnecessary. All because Patricia could not stand that I was doing something good without her permission or control. Sunday was quiet. I spent the day catching up on paperwork and taking Max for a long walk. The streets of Meadowbrook Heights were still buried, but that was about to change. Monday morning dawned clear and cold. I got up early and hooked up my plow. Starting at 6 a.m., I began systematically clearing every street in the development. It took me 4 hours, but by 10 a.m., every road was passable and most driveways were at least partially cleared where I had pushed snow aside. People came out to thank me as I worked. I waved and kept moving. This was what I did. This was why I had the equipment in the first place. By mid-morning, the neighborhood looked almost normal again. Cars that had been stuck were freed. Driveways were being finished by homeowners with shovels and snow blowers. Life was returning to normal. That afternoon, I got a call from Richard Sorensen. "Aaron, do you have a minute? I wanted to talk to you about something." "Sure, what's up?" "Several board members and I have been talking. Patricia is not working out as president. She is too focused on enforcement and not enough on community building. We are going to ask her to step down. Good luck with that." She does not strike me as the stepping down type. No, probably not. But if she refuses, we are going to have a vote of no confidence. The board can remove an officer with a majority vote. We have 3 votes, 4 if Susan comes around, which I think she will. Why are you telling me this? Because once Patricia is no longer president, we will need a new one. I was hoping you would consider joining the board. I laughed. "Richard, I have no interest in being on the HOA board. That sounds like a nightmare." "I get it, but think about it. You care about this community. You proved that. And we need people like you who will focus on what actually matters instead of nitpicking over rule violations." "I will think about it," I said, though I had no intention of joining the board. I had a business to run. The following week, Richard called a special board meeting. The agenda had one item: a vote of no confidence in Patricia Donovan as president. The meeting was on a Wednesday evening, and once again, the clubhouse was packed. Patricia arrived looking combative. She knew what was coming. The meeting was called to order, and Richard immediately made the motion for a vote of no confidence. Gary seconded. Patricia tried to argue that the motion was invalid, but Jake, attending as a concerned homeowner, cited the relevant sections of the bylaws that allowed for it. The vote was called. Richard, Gary, and Helen voted yes. Susan surprised everyone by also voting yes. Patricia was removed as president 4-1, her own vote being the only dissent. Richard was elected the new president that same night. Patricia sat in stony silence through the rest of the meeting, and then left without a word. The neighborhood relaxed after that. Richard was a competent and reasonable president. He focused on actual issues like street maintenance and common area upkeep, not on harassing residents over minor rule violations. Patricia remained on the board as a regular member, but she stopped coming to meetings after a few months. Eventually, she resigned entirely. Word was that she put her house up for sale that spring, though I never confirmed it. February and March brought several more snowstorms, and each time I cleared the streets without incident. People waved. Some brought me coffee or cookies. It felt like a real community again. In April, as the snow finally melted and spring arrived in Montana, I got a letter in the mail from the HOA. For a brief moment, I felt that old anxiety, wondering what complaint Patricia had dug up from somewhere. But when I opened it, I found a letter of appreciation from the board and a gift card to a local restaurant. The letter thanked me for my service to the community and specifically mentioned the snow clearing. I put the letter on my refrigerator, held up by a magnet. It was a small thing, but it represented something important. Sometimes standing up for yourself and refusing to be pushed around by petty tyrants actually works out. Sometimes the community recognizes what is right and what is wrong and acts accordingly. The Meadowbrook Heights HOA was far from perfect, but at least it was now run by reasonable people who understood that an HOA existed to serve the community, not to control it. And I could clear snow without fear of retaliation or ridiculous fines. As spring turned to summer, life in the neighborhood continued smoothly. The HOA board under Richard's leadership actually accomplished useful things. They repaired the playground equipment in the common area. They organized a neighborhood garage sale. They hired a management company to handle the busy work, so volunteers did not have to do everything. Patricia's house did go up for sale in May. I never saw her again after she resigned from the board. I heard through the neighborhood gossip chain that she moved to Florida. Good riddance as far as I was concerned. In June, I got a call from Bill Henderson. "Aaron, a bunch of us are organizing a neighborhood barbecue for the 4th of July. We were hoping you could help with setup, maybe bring your truck to haul some stuff." "Sure, I can do that." "Great." "And Aaron, thanks again for everything you did this winter. You really stood up for all of us. I just wanted to clear snow without getting fined for it, but I appreciate it." The 4th of July barbecue was a huge success. Nearly every household participated. Kids ran around playing, adults chatted and ate, and there was a real sense of community that had been missing during Patricia's reign of petty tyranny. As summer progressed, my business stayed busy with landscaping work. I hired 2 additional employees to keep up with demand. Max got older and a little slower, but still greeted me enthusiastically every time I came home. September arrived, and with it, the first hints of fall. The leaves began to change colors and the air grew crisp. I knew winter was coming again, and with it, more snow. But this time, I would be able to handle it without fear of harassment or fines. October brought the first real snow, just a dusting, but enough to remind everyone that winter was not far off. I checked my equipment, made sure everything was in good working order, and prepared for the busy season ahead. In November, Richard called me. "Aaron, Susan is resigning from the board. She and her husband are relocating for his job. That leaves us with an empty seat. I know you said you were not interested, but I wanted to ask one more time if you would consider it." I thought about it. I really did. But the truth was, I did not want the hassle. "I appreciate the offer, Richard, but I am going to pass. My business keeps me too busy, especially in winter. I would not be able to give it the attention it deserves." "I understand, but if you ever change your mind, let me know." They ended up appointing Jake Morrison to fill the empty seat. He accepted, mostly because he wanted to make sure the HOA did not slide back into the kind of overreaching authoritarianism that Patricia had represented. With Jake on the board, I felt confident things would stay reasonable. December brought the first major snowstorm of the season, 11 inches overnight. I woke early, cleared my commercial contracts, and then spent the morning clearing Meadowbrook Heights streets. No fines, no complaints, just appreciation from neighbors who could now get to work and go about their lives. Christmas came and went. The neighborhood was decorated with lights and lawn displays. The HOA, in a nice touch organized by Richard, held a lighting contest with small prizes. It was the kind of community-building activity that actually made sense, not the enforcement-focused nonsense Patricia had prioritized. New Year's arrived, and I reflected on the past year. It had been quite a journey. What started as a simple fine for doing a good deed had turned into a neighborhood battle that ultimately resulted in real positive change. Patricia was gone, the HOA board was reasonable, and I could continue my snow-clearing services without fear. January brought more snow and with it, more opportunities for me to help my neighbors. Each time I fired up the plow, I thought about that first fine, that ridiculous $500 penalty that Patricia had issued. In a weird way, it had been a blessing. It had forced the community to confront the kind of HOA they wanted to be, and they had chosen correctly. One evening in late January, I was sitting on my couch watching a hockey game when there was a knock at my door. Max barked once, and I got up to answer it. Standing on my porch was Helen Martinez with a homemade pie. "Hi, Aaron. I made too many pies and thought you might like one. Apple. I hope that is okay." "That is very kind of you, Helen. Thank you." I took the pie, still warm. "I also wanted to say thank you again for what you did last year." Standing up to Patricia like that, it could not have been easy. It needed to be done. She was out of control. A lot of people were afraid to say anything. They did not want to be targeted by the HOA, but you were not afraid, and that gave the rest of us courage. After she left, I sat back down with a slice of pie and thought about her words. I had not considered myself particularly brave. I had just been unwilling to accept an unfair fine. But sometimes, that is all it takes to spark real change. Just one person refusing to go along with something wrong. February came around again, marking exactly 1 year since the original fine. The weather threw a major storm at us, 15 inches over 2 days. I cleared and cleared and cleared, working long hours to keep both my commercial contracts and the neighborhood streets passable. On the third morning after the storm, I found an envelope tucked into my mailbox. Not an official HOA letter this time, but a plain white envelope with my name handwritten on it. Inside was a card signed by dozens of neighborhood residents. It thanked me for my service and included several gift cards to local businesses. I was not going to lie, it choked me up a bit. Not the gift cards, though those were nice, but the fact that people recognized and appreciated what I did. That was all I had really wanted in the first place. Not thanks necessarily, but at least not to be punished for helping. As winter wound down and March arrived with its mix of snow and early spring weather, I found myself grateful for how everything had turned out. The situation with Patricia and the HOA had been infuriating and stressful, but it had also brought the community together and resulted in positive change. The HOA was now actually functional and focused on the right things. People were happier. Even the property values in Meadowbrook Heights had ticked up slightly according to Richard, who kept track of such things. In April, I got an email from Richard. The HOA was planning to formalize a snow removal program for the next winter. They had budget approval to pay for professional snow clearing services for the private streets. Richard wanted to know if I would be interested in submitting a bid. I thought about it carefully. On one hand, getting paid for something I had been doing for free would be nice. On the other hand, I did not want to turn a neighborly service into a purely commercial transaction. But then I realized that it would not change anything. I would clear the snow either way because that was who I was. Getting paid for it just meant the HOA was recognizing the value of the service, which was appropriate. I submitted a bid that was fair but not inflated. I charged less than I would charge a commercial client because this was my neighborhood. The HOA board reviewed 3 bids and selected mine. Starting the following winter season, I would be the official snow removal contractor for Meadowbrook Heights. That summer was peaceful. My business continued to thrive. Max enjoyed his walks in the Montana sunshine. The neighborhood hosted several events, all well-attended and drama-free. It was the kind of life I had hoped for when I bought my house in Meadowbrook Heights. In September, I signed the snow removal contract with the HOA. It was a moment of satisfaction, a tangible recognition that doing the right thing and standing up for yourself could actually work out. That refusing to be bullied by petty bureaucrats who wielded minor authority like a weapon could lead to positive change. As October brought the first cold snaps and November brought the first snow, I prepared for another Montana winter. This time, though, everything was different. I had a contract. I had the community support. I had clear rules that protected me from harassment. The first major snow of the season came in late November, just before Thanksgiving. 10 inches overnight, heavy and wet. I started clearing at 5 in the morning, working methodically through the neighborhood streets. By 8 a.m., every road was passable. By 10 a.m., I had cleared the main areas and was working on the cul-de-sacs. As I worked, neighbors waved from windows. Some came out to thank me. A few brought coffee. It was exactly what community was supposed to feel like, people helping each other and appreciating that help. That evening, Jake called me. "Hey man, I heard you were out clearing snow at 5 in the morning. That is the job. Any complaints about noise?" I laughed. Not a single one. Funny how that works when the HOA president is not a petty tyrant looking for reasons to fine people. Funny how that works indeed. We chatted for a bit about other things, but that exchange stuck with me. The noise ordinance was still in the CC and Articus. I was still clearing snow early in the morning, technically during prohibited hours. But nobody cared because everyone understood that having clear streets was more important than absolute silence at 6 a.m. Common sense had prevailed, which was all I had wanted from the beginning. December was a busy month for snow. Montana got hammered with storm after storm. I cleared the neighborhood streets 5 times in 2 weeks. Each time I submitted my invoice to the HOA, and each time payment arrived promptly. It was professional, efficient, and fair. Christmas Eve brought yet another storm, 8 inches that started in the late afternoon and continued into the evening. I waited until the snow stopped around 10 p.m., then bundled up and headed out with my truck. The neighborhood was quiet, houses decorated with Christmas lights reflecting off the fresh snow. It was beautiful in that way that only a snowy night can be. I cleared the streets slowly, carefully, enjoying the peacefulness of it. By midnight, I was done. Meadowbrook Heights was ready for Christmas morning. Families could drive to visit relatives. Kids could go outside and play in the snow. Life could continue normally, which was the whole point of everything I did. When I got home, I sat in my truck for a moment before going inside, looking at the neighborhood I had fought for and won. A year and a half ago, Patricia Donovan had sent me that $500 fine, trying to punish me for helping people. She had probably thought I would just pay it and shut up. Instead, I stood my ground. I refused to accept her petty tyranny. I stopped clearing snow until the community forced the HOA to make things right. It had been the right decision. Not the easy decision, but the right one. Sometimes you have to stand up to bullies, even bullies who hide behind rules and regulations and official-sounding titles. Sometimes you have to make people uncomfortable to force necessary change. I got out of my truck and headed inside. Max greeted me at the door, tail wagging. I scratched his ears and got myself something to eat. Tomorrow was Christmas, and I planned to spend it relaxing with my dog, watching movies, and maybe calling my parents who had retired to Arizona. As I settled onto the couch with Max beside me, I felt a deep sense of contentment. I had my business. I had my home. I had a neighborhood that appreciated me. And I had the satisfaction of knowing I had stood up for what was right and won. The rest of that winter passed without incident. More snow came and I cleared it. Invoices were submitted and paid. Spring arrived eventually, as it always does in Montana, and the snow melted away. The streets of Meadowbrook Heights went from white to black to visible again. Grass emerged. Trees budded. Life continued. In March, the HOA held their annual meeting to elect board members. Richard decided not to run for another term as president, saying he had accomplished what he wanted to accomplish. Jake stepped up and was elected president unopposed. Helen became vice president. 2 new members joined the board, both reasonable people who understood what an HOA was actually supposed to do. During that meeting, Jake publicly thanked me for my snow removal services throughout the winter. He noted that complaints had dropped to zero, satisfaction was high, and the investment in professional snow removal had been one of the best decisions the board had made. People applauded. I nodded in acknowledgement. After the meeting, several people came up to chat. Bill Henderson shook my hand. "You know, Aaron, what you did really changed this place. It could have gone so differently. Patricia could have won, the board could have dug in. But you stood firm and it made all the difference." "I just did not want to pay a BS fine," I said with a smile. "It was more than that. You showed us that we did not have to accept bad leadership just because it had an official title. You reminded us that the HOA works for us, not the other way around." Those words meant a lot. I had never set out to be some kind of neighborhood hero. I just wanted to clear snow without getting hassled. But in the process, I had accidentally sparked a movement that transformed Meadowbrook Heights from a place run by a petty dictator into a real community with responsive, reasonable leadership. As spring turned to summer and summer to fall, life in Meadowbrook Heights continued smoothly. The HOA functioned as it should, handling actual problems and staying out of people's way otherwise. Neighbors got along. Property values continued to increase. It was, quite simply, a nice place to live. In October, I renewed my snow removal contract with the HOA for another winter. Jake and the board approved it without hesitation. They knew they had a good thing going, and so did I. It was a professional relationship built on mutual respect and common sense, exactly what it should have been from the beginning. November brought the first snow again, and the cycle began anew. But this time, there was no drama, no fines, no battles. Just snow falling and being cleared and life going on. It was normal in the best possible way. One afternoon in December, I was clearing a street in Meadowbrook Heights when I noticed the house that used to be Patricia's had new owners moving in. A young couple with 2 small kids. They waved at me as I drove past, and I waved back. They had no idea about the drama that house had represented, and that was fine. Ancient history now. Later that day, the woman from the couple stopped by my house. "Hi, I'm Melissa. My husband and I just moved in down the street." I wanted to introduce myself. Aaron Vance, welcome to the neighborhood. Thank you. I noticed you clearing the streets earlier. Is that something the HOA provides? Yeah, I am the contractor. If there is snow, I will clear it. That is wonderful. Our old neighborhood did not have anything like that. We are really happy to be here. It is a good neighborhood, good people, good HOA board. You will like it. After she left, I realized that was the ultimate vindication of everything that had happened. New residents moving in and finding a well-run community with good services. That was what I had fought for, not for myself, but for everyone who lived here. As December progressed and the holiday season approached, I found myself reflecting on the journey that had brought me to this point. It had started with anger and frustration, a stupid fine for a good deed, but it had ended with real positive change, a better HOA, a stronger community, and a personal lesson about the importance of standing up for yourself and refusing to accept injustice, even small-scale HOA injustice. Christmas came and went quietly. I spent it with Max, video chatting with my parents and my sister who lived in Seattle. The neighborhood was peaceful, streets clear, lights twinkling, everyone going about their holiday celebrations without drama or conflict. As the year drew to a close and I looked ahead to the new year, I felt genuinely good about where things stood. The battle with Patricia and the old HOA board was long over. The neighborhood had moved on. I had moved on. But the lessons remained. Stand up for yourself. Do not accept unjust treatment. Sometimes fighting back is exactly the right thing to do. New Year's Eve arrived, and I spent it quietly at home with Max. At midnight, I could hear neighbors celebrating, fireworks going off somewhere in the distance. I raised a glass of whiskey and a silent toast to the year that was ending and the one beginning. It had been quite a ride, but I would not change any of it. The next morning, New Year's Day, I woke to find 4 inches of fresh snow had fallen overnight. I smiled, got dressed, and headed out to clear the streets. It was a new year, a new beginning, but some things remained constant. Snow fell in Montana winters. I cleared it. Life went on, and that really was the whole point. Not to be a hero or prove anything grand, just to live a normal life without being harassed by petty tyrants who thought a little bit of power made them important. Patricia Donovan had learned that lesson the hard way. The community had learned it too. And I had learned that sometimes the right kind of stubbornness, the refusal to back down when you are in the right, can actually change things for the better. As I drove through the quiet streets of Meadowbrook Heights that New Year's morning, my plow blade pushing snow aside and leaving clear pavement behind, I felt a deep sense of satisfaction. This was my neighborhood. These were my people. And this was my contribution to making it a better place to live. The sun came up over the mountains to the east, painting the snow-covered landscape in shades of pink and gold. Another Montana winter day. Another opportunity to do good work and help my neighbors. Another reminder that standing up for yourself and others was always worth it, no matter how difficult it might be in the moment. I finished clearing the last street and headed home, satisfied with a job well done. Max was waiting for me, and I had a pot of coffee brewing. It was going to be a good year. I could feel it. And it all started with refusing to pay a $500 fine for doing the right thing. Sometimes the smallest acts of resistance lead to the biggest changes. Sometimes saying no to injustice is exactly what a community needs to remember who they are and what they stand for. That was my story. That was how I fought my HOA and won. Not through lawyers or lawsuits, though Jake had been invaluable, but through simple, stubborn refusal to accept unjust treatment and a willingness to let the chips fall where they may. The community had my back when it mattered. Together, We transformed Meadowbrook Heights from a place of petty tyranny to a genuine community. And that was worth more than any amount of money or any amount of cleared snow.